All right, for this next section, 7.6, solving two-step inequalities. Yeehaw. So to solve two-step inequalities, it's very similar to equations, except for one or two, you could say, major differences. Obviously, inequalities are not equations, and the thing that sets an inequality different from an equation is simply the symbol. It has the less than, greater than, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to symbols. You should know all this already because we've tackled already solving one-step inequalities. We're now just dealing with two-step inequalities. So that's the overall, blatantly obvious difference. So just make sure that you use an inequality symbol after you have solved a problem. Okay? I still have a few students who are refusing to learn this fact and are writing down equal signs in the problem. Don't do that. It makes the whole thing wrong, and you will lose a lot of points every time you do that. So, it's really a simple thing to avoid. Just learn this fact, okay? Seriously, come on. Moving on now, there is another difference, and we'll get onto that in a few more examples. So let's work on these examples first, which will be pretty easy. So first we have these two things to solve. And just like an equation, you can draw the line underneath the inequality symbol just like we do with the equal symbol on an equation, if you want to. So now we're going to say plus 9 in order to cancel this out. So we have 5a is less than 20. Okay, it's less than 20. So we now divide by 5, a is, once again, less than 4, okay? Now, inequalities are a little tricky. You can't check them quite the normal way, but one thing that you can do is if you want to pick a number that, if I were to use 4 and I work this out, I get 11 is less than 11, which isn't true. But neither is 4. 4 is not less than 4. So what you can do with inequalities is you can pick any number that makes this true and plug it in up here, and it should make this true. What I mean by that is pick a number for a that's less than 4. Like let's say 3. So if you picked 3 and you said, well, let's put it up here. So if you have 3 and you have 5 times 3, you get 15. Well, 15 minus 9 is 6. Is 6 less than 11? Well, yes. So that you can kind of check that way, but inequalities are just more complicated to check. You can still do it. It just takes a little bit more knowledge of how inequalities work to make sure you're checking the right way. Okay? So I'm not saying don't check your answers. Do check your answers. Just make sure you understand how inequalities work before you do that. Okay? All right, moving on to the next problem. Now, please, once again, draw your line to notice that we have, this time, the variables on the other side, and so we need to get rid of these numbers first. So we're going to get rid of the 6, so we have to add 6 because it says minus, so we add 6. This is a negative, so realize that this is more like subtracting, so you're going to get a negative 4 is greater than or equal to 1/2 x, okay? So now we work this out so that we get, we multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2. Now before I do that though, just gonna go ahead and say this, that I want my x on the left side when I get done with all this. So I'm gonna have to flip this over. Now you have to be mindful that when you move the x to the other side, the whole thing has to flip. So that's why we end up with 1/2 x is less than or equal to negative 4. So the whole thing has to flip. The symbol included has to be facing the different direction. It was pointing at the x originally. It's still pointing at the x now. So now you multiply by the reciprocal, which is 2/1. Multiply by 2/1. This gets you x is less than or equal to negative 8. Okay? So there you go. All right, this next example right here is an example of the difference between equations and inequalities, and you'll see it happen on the second step. I hope you remember what that difference is. If you don't, I will remind you. -4. So we end up with negative 2m is less than or equal to 30. All right, now what do we have to do to get rid of that negative 2? Well, you're going to have to divide by negative 2. Now, does someone remember what is so important about dividing both sides by negative 2? What's going to happen? Do you remember? But inequalities, when you multiply or divide both sides by a negative, you have to flip the symbol. I hope you remember that. So you end up with m is greater than or equal to negative 15. Now, we didn't bother flipping the symbol up here, even though there was a negative involved, because we multiplied both sides by 2, which was positive. Over here, we're dividing both sides by negative 2. So it doesn't matter if there's a negative in there or not. It just matters what I'm dividing and multiplying both sides by. That's what is important, okay? So we'll do more examples, and I think you'll see it as we go on. It's just important that you do this right away. All right, now again, we have a problem like this. Now, if you want, because if you notice, variables on this side, since we're going to have to put the variable on the other side already, so a lot of students just find it easier to flip the whole thing at the very beginning. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put negative 0.5b. Make sure you know this is a b, not a 6. Put that extra little line right there. Do whatever you have to do. Minus 2.7 is, now remember, this symbol was facing this way, so now we face it the other way. It's now a greater than symbol. And you put that like that. So you see, we just went ahead and flipped the whole thing. It's sometimes easier to do at the beginning, personally. We're now going to have to go through and add. Whoops, I made that a 5. Why'd that happen? I don't know what happened there. Add this to this, and you end up with you have negative 0.5b is greater than 11. So now we need to divide by negative 0.5, divide by negative 0.5, and you would end up with a b is less than, and it might be helpful to go through and highlight this one and this one up here, just so you know that, oh yeah, that's what happens there. So if you do this, you're going to end up with a negative 22. So that's all you do there. So any questions you have, please write them down, ask them in class. See you then.